And a very important topic as well. Female students at Rhodes University caused quite a stir last week when they protested against sexual violence, half naked, when the Fees Must Fall movement began last year. Some students resorted to violence to make their voices heard. What lengths do people go to when they feel so frustrated with the system that they believe it is not protective enough or aligned with their needs? Well, to discuss this further, we are joined now by Ashwanee Budoo from the Centre for Human Rights at the University of Pretoria. It's good to have you with us and welcome to the program.
Thank you.
How important are human rights or the recognition of human rights of people?
Human rights are basically the rights that are inherent to individuals just by virtue of them human beings. They're important to people because they afford the minimum standards that are necessary for people to live with dignity, peace, justice, and freedom. It is important that someone's human rights are recognized, because then it affords them the security that they are being treated on an equal basis as others in the society, and that they will not be afforded an inferior treatment than someone else.
Yeah. You know, we've seen some exceptionally violent protests. We've seen other protests like we're seeing on the screen right now. And this was at Rhodes University, where a lot of women came together in protest against what they say were rapists on the campus. Some of them standing there without tops on, trying to cause a bit of a stir within the community, try and get a message across. You know, where do we draw the line, though, where a lot of these, I suppose, these protests are filled with heavy emotions and yet may not be the right way to go?
Indeed, as you said, a protest is full of emotions, because usually when someone resorts to these acts, they are with frustration and desperation. However, legally speaking, despite the fact that the Constitution protects the right to protest, there are limitations to these rights. The Constitution in Section 36 provides for limitations to the enjoyment of rights as long as they are reasonable and justifiable in an open and democratic society. And this gives rise to absolute and limited or qualified rights. Absolute rights, such as the right to life, cannot be limited in any circumstances, and limited or qualified rights, such as the right to protest, are limited. We have, let me take the example of the Rhodes protests that are happening. To put a limitation on protesting naked or using nudity as a protest, one can use the Sexual Offences Act, which provides that someone who's above 18 who willfully exposes himself or herself in an indecent manner is liable to an offense. So even if one is frustrated or desperate, one cannot usually use extreme measures, because then it can be unlawful.
Yeah. You know, I think extreme measures when it comes to protests in South Africa is not something new to us. It's something that we've seen through the years, through the generations, and it seems to be gaining momentum, and we're seeing it more often, and perhaps not necessarily, you know, we would see them always with service delivery protests, but now it's moving into places perhaps we've never really seen them as in such a way that we have, especially at some of the universities at the moment. What does this say about South Africa and what the people of South Africa are feeling right now, especially discussing human rights? Do the certain sectors of South Africans feel that their human rights are being abused or overlooked at certain points?
These protests are manifestations of desperation and frustration. People have been demanding for their rights to be respected, for their human rights to be respected, but still it is not being respected. So to be heard, so as to have their voices heard out there, people resort to extreme measures. Sometimes you might just be having a peaceful protest and the government will just overlook it, or the authority will just overlook it, thinking that, oh, it's just another protest and it will subside with time. But then sometimes you're so frustrated. For instance, I was reading the statement of one of the students at the Rhodes University, And she stated that the way the authority dealt with, it's not the authority, I'm sorry, the way the university dealt with her case made her feel like she was not important. So in the context of South Africa, I think that there's a need to have a better approach to social issues so as for people to feel like their human rights are being respected.
Yeah, yeah. It's a big discussion. I think we need to look more into it, but it would be interesting to ask some of our viewers out there, what do you think about these protests and the lengths that some of our protesters go to have their voices heard? We'd love to hear from you on the program. Please do write to us at Morning Live SABC. I mean, you've been watching some of these protests, and let's just use the protest that we saw at Rhodes University, where the young woman came through without shirts on, and they were protesting half naked against what they call men that are raping on campus. I mean, do you think this is the way to make a message come across? We're talking about it. I suppose the message did get across, but what do you think? We'd love to hear from you. Please write to us on the program. That was our guest joining us from which Pretoria, which studio? I don't even remember which studio she was from. Pretoria's, thank you very much. Our Pretoria studios, Ashwanee Budoo. She's from the Center for Human Rights. All right, let's take